What's going on, guys? This is Chris with Kingship Tech. Thanks for coming to the channel. This is a channel all about tech gear for the amateur user. And in today's video, it's going to be a little bit different, but it's going to be more of a tutorial. And the topic is using your camera in manual settings. So let's get right into the video. Alright guys, so with this video, I've been wanting to do it for a little while, and it's something that is actually a really good learning experience if you're just starting out. Using your camera in manual settings is essential. I can't stress it enough that it's important for any of us to learn how to use our camera in manual mode. Every camera comes in auto mode, has an automatic mode, and it does its job. It tries to give you the most optimal picture in any environment that you're in. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't let you get the look that you're really after. And being a creator, maybe that's pretty important to you, is to achieve maybe a cinematic look or have an artistic picture if you're a photographer, or be a portrait photographer. But essentially, whatever you're doing, the end result, you have to be able to use the camera, because it's just a tool. Anyways, use the camera to get the results that you want. Before I give you the live presentation of being able to use your camera with manual or in manual settings, manual exposure settings, let's go ahead and quickly run into the three things that are going to be changing with these settings. You have shutter speed, aperture, f-stop, and ISO, and all three of those things work together to get you the perfect settings to take your picture. The shutter speed is all about letting light in and the amount of light, but also how fast it takes the picture, how fast the shutter closes and takes that shot. If you're doing sports or wildlife photography, you probably want a fast shutter. Or even if you're taking pictures of your kids, then you probably want a fast shutter speed, so that way you can get that moment right then and there before they move. F-stop is also lets in light, but what it does is it affects the separation or the shallow depth of field. And what I'm saying is, like, even right now I'm at aperture f2.8 and it's focused on me, but my background is blurred out, so I'm the one in focus right here. You achieve that by a low aperture, and so that is the goal with aperture. Having a fast lens, that's what people call fast lenses, is when they are low aperture, and you get that really awesome bokeh or shallow depth of field. The last one is ISO, and ISO is basically like almost like artificial light, and it's technology that the camera uses to brighten up the picture, almost artificially. And that's my analogy and my interpretation of it, because it's not giving you like your shutter speed is how long the shutter takes to close, therefore allowing more light to come in. The f-stop is an actual blades, like the aperture blades inside of the lens that closes and opens. The wider, the more light, obviously the more closed it looks through, the darker the picture is. But ISO is kind of like this artificial image, and that's why cameras have gotten progressively better with ISO the newer they get, because their technology is getting better. And so, like, the Canon RP does a lot better in low light or high ISO than, say, the Canon M50 did in high ISO settings. The problem with ISO is the higher you get, the more noise you introduce into the picture, that grainy background, which is sometimes an artistic look, but most of the time you don't want it at all, and therefore you want as low ISO as possible is really the goal, low ISO. So those three things, you mash them all together and you play with them, and it gives you the picture that you really want. Now that I got that explained, let's go ahead right into a live demonstration. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to show you as I've changed these settings live, and then I'll show you what it looks like live. All right, so let's get right into it. Okay, so we're out here in the backyard wanting to do a live demonstration of using your camera in manual settings. Now, we have talked about the shutter speed, the aperture or the f-stop, and the ISO. When it comes to video, this is where you really want to take control of your settings, because in automatic mode it's going to just change everything so that way it looks the best. If you want to look more cinematic, the rule is to have your 24 frames per second for if you're doing this kind of stuff, so it's a natural looking blur, with a shutter speed of double that, which is 48, but cameras now only do 50, so 50 will do. And then your aperture is going to control what you're focusing on, let's put it that way. If you have a center of attention, one object, then you're going to be able to do a low aperture. That's what you really want, is a low aperture. If you want to showcase everything in the background, then you want a high aperture, like a f. That's why they go all the way up to aperture f20 on some cameras, or higher. But the higher the aperture basically gives you everything in focus. The lower the aperture of the f-stop gives you the center of attention that you want and kind of blurs everything else in the background. In this scenario, I have the ISO at 400, I have the f-stop at 2.8, and I have the shutter speed at 50 to be able to shoot this video. And I had to put a ND filter on here to be able to shoot it at f2.8 because that is a lot of light coming through the lens. And I'm sitting outside and it's a sunny day. Let's go ahead and change some of these settings so you can see how they affect the picture. I'm not going to change the shutter speed because that needs to stay at 50 because I'm shooting in 24 frames per second. And a side note, if you're going to shoot in 60 frames per second, you want the shutter speed to be at 120, and if you're going to shoot at 120 frames per second, you want your shutter speed to be at 240. What we get to play with is the aperture and the ISO. So at f2.8, you can see it's a shallow depth of field look. I am in focus completely, but my background is very blurred out, and there's a lot of separation. This is fine for just me, but like I said, if you have a group of people that you want to shoot, you might want to go up to something higher like the f5.6 range to be able to get more things in focus. But let's go ahead and change the aperture right now live. So I'm going to touch this and I'm going to start going up, and then you'll see what it does to the picture. 3.2, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, 5.6. So as you can tell, it definitely just made everything darker because I didn't change anything but the f-stop. Now if I want to change to be able to compose again, I have to change one of the three items. We're not going to change the shutter speed because we're doing video, but for this we can change the ISO to go higher. So we're at 400 ISO, and we'll go 5, 6, 8, 1000, 1250. Right there is right around, let's go 1600. So that is back up to pretty much where we were before, but there's more visibility on what's behind me. And so that's kind of the benefit of being able to play with this, is you get the picture that you want. It's customized to what you want. For the most part, I really like shooting in low f-stop scenarios. It makes so that thing you're focusing on is the center of attention for the shot, and that's very cinematic. I mean, if you're going to be watching any movies, you see how they have focus on one thing and everything else is pretty much blurred away. And some of my favorite shots are at nighttime with Christmas lights, and that way you have somebody in focus and then you have the background that is really blurred out and has a lot of bokeh from the Christmas lights. But this camera here is the Canon RP, and it does really well in high ISO settings, all the way up to I think 12,500 is where you can get away with shooting at that high of ISO. After that, you start running into issues with noise coming into the pictures. I want to go back down to ISO 400, and I'm going to change this ND filter to bring in more light. What am I at here? Okay, so basically now I am at like 2 stops on this ND filter, and I'm back at ISO 400, aperture 5.6. If you're doing video, you can't touch the shutter speed, and therefore you want to add things like a variable ND filter or ramp up your aperture or whatever. It's whatever you need it to be, and that's why this is so beneficial, because you can do whatever you want. You can change it however you want. But for kicks, I'm going to go ahead and cut this video, and I'm going to go into auto mode and see what it does, and I'll tell you what the settings look like. Let's do that now. Okay, so now we're back, but we're in automatic mode, and it's not bad, but see the image, how it looks kind of funny. My movements they're not blurry anymore. They're like and that's because my shutter speed's at 100, so that's too fast, and so therefore it's getting all of my movements because it's double what I even had before. So it looks like a soap opera because of my movements. Now that might work for some people, like if in the type of videos that you do, if you want to dramatize the event and I don't know, like make it almost like dreamlike, then this is this is what it would look like. But also to go with that, my f-stop's at 5.6 and my ISO is at 640, bouncing between 640 and 800, depending on where I stand. But the bad thing about that is it won't go down to f2.8. Let's see. It stays at f5.6 because to the camera that's the optimal setting of the camera, and I don't like that. I feel like that's just not, it's not smart enough for what I'm trying to do or what you're trying to do with your videos. I much prefer being able to take control of it, and that's the benefit of it in video mode. But enough of that. Let's go ahead and go into photography settings now, and that way you can see why or what you would make your settings so that way it works the best for you. Alright, let's go.